Okay, for this one, I'm just going to be talking through a script. I've got the script up here, so I'll be looking to this direction a lot of the time, but I'm going to try to look at you guys as much as possible. But with this, the idea will be to just kind of go over the reading and the implications of the reading. So this the script is also posted separately if you'd rather just read, and obviously then you can cut out this first 30 seconds. But having said that, stories are political. They may not always seem that way, but they generally are. This is a perfect time to understand that. For instance, one of the big things obviously going on right now is all this stuff with, of course, the COVID-19 virus. And of course, we're all trapped inside, and it sucks. Uh, Edgar Allan Poe's Masque of the Red Death is one of my favorite stories to teach to my sophomores each year. And it's, of course, an American lit story. It's in our textbook. It's a story of, this prince who locks himself away with all of his best friends and has a big, giant party with like hundreds of nobles that are his close friends in his party. It's like 6 months long that this party in this castle goes on, and they lock out all the people outside because there's a plague happening outside. And in the end, of course, because of their partying, because of their extravagant life, because they're not practicing social distancing, um, with all that stuff, of course, ultimately the disease does get in, and of course the disease is embodied and goes around like scaring everyone first. But then when the prince attacks him, he contracts the disease and immediately dies, and then so do everyone else in the party. So basically, again, if you can't see how that connects to our current time, then well, obviously you're not trying very hard. Meanwhile, other stories can do the same thing. If you've ever read anything by Charles Dickens, probably the most obvious one for this is Oliver Twist, or the musical Oliver that's based off that. Even Oliver and Company is based off of this too, for some of you that watched that early in the year. But it's a criticism of poverty during the Victorian time. Now that some of that gets stripped out when you go to these other versions, like Oliver and Company. You can see how poverty is part of that story, but it's not really critiquing it. But if you go back to the original, it's definitely there. Another one, The Jungle, a story that by Upton Sinclair. It's a story mostly meant to be about how immigrants were being poorly treated in the early 1900s, 20th century. But really, it was talking also about the meatpacking plants in Chicago. Excuse me. And basically, it caused a huge uproar that led to things like the USDA being founded because people didn't like reading this book that showed them that their meat was being handled in a pretty bad way. So all of this type of stuff, whether it's pandemic, poverty, immigration, um, meat packing, obviously kind of a weird topic in this list, but they can basically teach us something about these books can teach us something about these topics. In some cases, again, they're not they have unintended meanings because as a writer, if I write something, I pour my values into that, whether I do so intentionally or not. There was a story that I wrote because I was a creative writing minor in college. There was a story I wrote where I just had like basically a college kid that just graduated college, so not a college kid anymore, but he was trying to find his first job. He was unemployed. He was, it was his birthday, and he just, instead of going out looking for a job, he just decided to kind of dress up in his nicest clothes and go out and like pretend like he's a big shot and like, kind of have lunch at a nice restaurant and pretend he's important for a day. And I had a pretty big, long time, like a pretty decent amount of the story is dedicated to him getting dressed. And I didn't think of this, but I was a big fan at the time and still am of the really old texts, the Odyssey, Beowulf, things like this. And that's one of those very common things. Those of you that you've had to read Beowulf this year, I'm sure. And like Beowulf getting ready to go fight Grendel is a big part of that. Him getting ready to go fight Grendel's mother, to go fight the dragon. They give lengthy descriptions of dressing up in armor. They do the same thing with Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. A lot of other stories like this do that type of stuff. Again, I was unintentional. I wasn't thinking I need to make my hero like Sir Gawain or like Beowulf, but I did it still. So you'll pour your values into these things. And sometimes those values can be either positive or harmless, like I think hopefully it was in my case. Sometimes, if you've got sort of racist or sexist attitudes in your culture at the time, it can be harmful, and then those stories are out there. kids read the stories, and it's that cycle where one generation passes the stuff off to the next. All right, I'm already getting off my script a little bit, so I'm going to move ahead a little bit. In the short version of this chapter, it breaks down some of the different types of this. It gets to feminist and Marxist, which have their own chapters, but I'm going to read the two that matter most for this paper. Multicultural criticism seeks to redress the historical domination in literature of the works of white men with Eurocentric viewpoints, making room on bookshelves and school booklets for works of authors of more varied backgrounds. And again, this gets to that idea that we talked about at the beginning of the year, that it was over 80% of Hollywood directors were white males. Again, I'm not going to sit here and say that all white males think alike. That's, that's a foolish type of thinking. But at the same time, it's kind of a boring argument. And there are still things that I can't directly understand because I am a white male, even if I don't think like every other white male does, that, a person of color or a woman or someone else like that could not better tell, or a person of a different faith. Um, that there are just certain things that no matter how much I study Judaism, I'm not going to understand what it's like to be part of Jewish culture. I can understand it intellectually, but not emotionally. So those types of things, like, it's good to get those different viewpoints, whether again it's a religious one, whether it's Hindu or Muslim or Jewish or something like that, whether it's hearing more stories from women, whether it's hearing more stories from, again, people of color. This type of stuff is important. The other one is African American criticism makes sure black writers and experiences are represented in the literary canon and in classroom, examines old texts for racial stereotyping, and defines traditions in African American writing. And again, these are the two types that you're going to try to be hitting. And this type of criticism, when it's done right, is the reason that something like Song of the South, a very famous Disney film that, if you've been to Disney World or Disneyland for that matter, Splash Mountain is themed for that film, but you'll never find that film anywhere, at least not easily, because it has caricatures of black characters that are considered pretty wildly racist. Now, the Splash Mountain version of it pulls all that out. It just deals with the animated characters and tells the story without that part of it. But that, it's kind of censored by Disney because they don't really like people seeing that they had this pretty wildly racist film in their history. And I actually have only seen a tiny part of it, so I don't necessarily know what's super racist about it, although the little bit I saw did seem not great. But it's also then why something like Huck Finn, with its 200 plus iterations of the N word in it, is still on shelves, still in classrooms, because it has values that are overwhelmingly are more positive than the use of that word. That word itself is a racist word, but it does not make the book racist. Song of the South, I don't think, has that word in it at all, but it doesn't matter. It's a pretty racist movie from what everyone says. So that's the type of stuff that you need to be looking at: is, are the characters in your movies, are they caricatures, or are they real people? Do they represent real things that are happening there? It's like I said with the stuff in Game of Thrones. I don't think the creators of Game of Thrones in those two scenes that I talked about were trying to do something racist with the character Daenerys Targaryen, and then those other armies that she has that are, people of color. I just don't think that they had enough people of color, a diverse enough writing staff, to point out that, hey, maybe this is going to come off differently to some people. So that's why this type of stuff is important, and that's why this type of uh, examination is important. The last thing I just want to hit you with on this is that this is tough thinking. This is stuff that is often taught not until senior year in high school, and sometimes not at all in high school. But it's important thinking. Because it does make you get outside your own box. It's that idea of building empathy, which is the bedrock of why we do, at least one of the bedrocks, at least, of why we do a study of literature. And if you're just first being introduced to this idea, you're likely to be pretty bad at it, or you're likely to, overreact to things or underreact to things. Because you have to build up, you have to kind of work this muscle. It's like the first time you do a bench press, you're probably not getting up there and bench pressing 200. Um, might be able to start with the bar. You might be able to do more than that. Might be able to do less than that. But you got to work your way up to these things. And you'll end up kind of going through stages with this, where at first you either like, if I showed Song of the South to my two kids in the other room, currently watching Mary Poppins actually, but if I put that on for them, they wouldn't see it as a racist movie. They just would laugh at the caricatures. They wouldn't even understand it because they're too innocent, they're too naive to see that. Then there's sort of the next group that, you know, either will just dismiss it all because they don't want to see it, or they'll overreact and they'll just try to condemn anything. That would be the same group that either doesn't see a problem with the use of the N word, or sees Huck Finn and says we got to get it out of there. It's terrible. Uses that word 200 times. Well, no, because you got to go past that. But you got to work your way up to this point where you have the context, where you understand things in context enough to see that yes, Huck Finn uses that word. Yes, it is a hateful word with pretty terrible history. But the overall book is actually showing Jim to be the most noble person there. Um, that, when you watch something like Black Panther, Killmonger's a pretty hateable villain, but also one of the more understandable villains. That he actually causes T'Challa, the hero, to rise up and be better by actually becoming a little bit more like Killmonger in some ways, while staying less like him in other ways. So, like, that's a way that you can read this, is you can see Killmonger, that it's treating this villain in a better way. That it's giving voice to the problems that he sees. So that's the type of stuff you can look at. Um, I'll post the script. The script, I didn't stick entirely to the script, so there'll be some things that you get from the video that is not in the script, some things that I didn't say in here that are in there. So you can look at one or the other. Either one should help. But hopefully this helps you with this next paper. Please read those 3 pages, at least from the short version. If you want to read the long version, obviously there's more there, but short version I think will probably do it for you if you feel comfortable and confident with what you got out of it. All right, that's it. I'm not sending any more videos this week, so I'm not going to make you like watch me a bunch of other times. Well, there is the one tomorrow, but that's the Friday Fun Day one, and that should be fun. So, but that's not about films lit stuff. So, see you later. Please do the check-ins for me, because it's nice to understand how you guys are doing. I'm gonna stop ranting now. See you later.